recording. Okay, perfect. So, yay. Well, welcome everybody to our masterclass. I'm so excited for you to be here. And we're going to make this interactive. We're going to make this engaging because that is what I'm all about when I work with our practice teams. And this is a 90-minute. So it's basically a preview, if you will, of some of the content that we cover in the 6-week program when we do this with our our practices. So the first thing I'm going to share, can you guys see my screen okay, with my slides and everything? Yeah? Okay. Yep. So my one request of you is I'd like you to take a moment, put your cell phone on silent, close down any other windows, close your door. This is going to be some time for me to pour into you. So let's minimize distractions, and that way we can be really present with me right now, if you don't mind. That's my one request. So let's give you guys a moment to do that. Get comfortable. Boy, oh boy, you guys all have these beautiful backgrounds. I feel like you guys all are just like in wonderful tropical places. It's wonderful. Okay, so let's begin with some introductions. Now, obviously, I know your names, but what I'd love to do is hear from you first and find out ever studied mindfulness before and what's that you'd like to come away from today with. So who'd like to start? Don't all start at once. Jessica, you want to start for us?
Yes, I'll start. Obviously, Jessica. I have not studied mindfulness before. Excited to learn a bit more. One thing I want to come away from today with, I guess, is maybe some tips on how to improve some stress management. Maybe building some more resilience around my personal well-being and how to build around that. So I think this will be good.
Great. Well, we're definitely going to do that. Thank you for sharing. Awesome. Hey, Kim, how about you?
Studied mindfulness? No. I think I have a lot to learn, so I'm excited about this. I think I would like to come away with tools to help regulate the day. I think all of us in dentistry know how chaotic things can get and the day never starts or ends how it started. So I think, anything that we have at our fingertips to kind of help us roll with the punches will be good.
Perfect. I love that. Yep, we're definitely going to have tools. I'm all about, there's a lot of people, a lot of coaches, consultants, and they talk a lot of theory. I'm not, while theory I think is great, I think having the practical tools is so important. So I'm kind of a mixture of both. So we're going to do all of that. And then I will give you these slides as well as this recording. And then I've got my autopilot in here taking a transcript. So I'll give you guys everything after this so that you can use that as a jumping off point to continue your practice. So thanks for sharing, Kim. Waynetta, how about you?
So for me, I don't believe I've ever studied mindfulness or before. However, some of the concepts I think I've dove into just with other like leadership training. One thing I'd like to come away with is I'm always try to be conscious of others with mindfulness, I think, based on the file you had sent. However, not so much of myself. So I think being taking in consideration myself.
Love that. Yes. And I love how your awareness and your vulnerability in sharing that. So thank you. Yeah, this is a safe space. I hope everybody will feel safe, to be able to really participate in this and really fully take advantage of what we're doing. So, hey, Donnie, how about you, Mr. Birthday Man? Happy birthday.
That got out, huh?
Yeah, it
did. Yeah, no, Marty, really appreciate the time today. I think for me, and there's a lot of what everyone else is saying, but for us as a team, I think there's times that we've all, as a team, been stressed out, and not just stressed from the work, but how we can work as a team more efficiently and also support and help each other when we're all seeing that stress kind of approach, which is probably right now at the end of the year. So yeah, that's, I'm more concerned about the entire team as our culture and health continues to grow.
Love that. Yes. Thank you for sharing, Donnie. That's wonderful. And I'm going to, have you studied mindfulness before or not really? No.
They do not teach this in the military, I don't think.
But they should.
Yes, 100% they should.
Actually, I had a meditation teacher years ago, and he actually would go and teach different sects of the military, like the Army and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely a movement towards more of this, but I don't know that we're fully where we need to be yet. So we're moving in that direction. Miss Catherine, hello. How about you, my dear?
How are you? So I actually have done a mindfulness and a meditation course. The meditation part didn't do so good. Just sitting there for too long. Can't really focus. But I feel like utilizing mindfulness, like everybody was saying, in stressful situations, and just being mindful of the different personalities that we work with and the different situations at hand. I think it'll really help us all out.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, you guys. That's super helpful. So let me just do a quick 2 seconds on me. The focus is obviously not about me today. It's about you. My company is called Full Pocket Coaching. I got to know Kim and members of the team because I have been the fractional integrator and CMO and COO for Dr. Scuria at Triangle Restoration Dentistry. We are a proud Guardian partner. It's very wonderful having you guys on board. And I also have the pleasure of working as this fractional CMO at New Start. And my company provides fractional C-level services to visionary leadership teams just like yourselves. And part of that is we have fractional chief mindfulness officer, chief culture officer, CMO, and integrator. So what we're finding is that the mindfulness and the culture pieces of this are really helpful when we have DSO leadership teams like yourselves who have so many other things going on that sometimes it's nice to white label and bring in somebody like myself with our team to be able to go into practices and work as sort of an extension of you to help our practice teams to get to the next level and things that we might not normally think of. So just a little bit about me. So let's talk about how we're going to spend our time together. I'm a really big fan of telling people what I'm going to tell them, then I tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you. So that way we make sure from a communication perspective that I'm managing your expectations. So we'll start off with a little bit about how we're going to define mindfulness. Part one, we're going to talk about how we move out of autopilot. And this is where the raisins come in. So does everybody have their raisins? Yes? Donnie, no raisins?
I am not working at my house, and I totally forgot them, so it's not a good excuse, is it?
That's okay. Are you near your kitchen?
I am not. I'm at a WeWork place in Uptown Charlotte.
Okay. Do they have anything in the pantry there, like a granola bar, perhaps?
They've got some stuff in there. You want me to go grab something?
Yeah. Could you go grab yourself a snack, something that, because we're going to do a little thing together, and I'd hate for you to miss out on that opportunity. So we'll just hit the pause button for a quick second while you grab something. Cool.
I'm
Don't
glad
keep
to
going.
know.
I'm listening. Don't keep going.
You're glad to know what
substitutions are allowed. I'm glad to know this because I have cranberries, not raisins.
Totally fine. You will not miss out. I'll tell you, when I did this with one of my practice teams, because in dental, we typically don't espouse raisins or sticky things like this. So we did use chocolate. I had been up in Connecticut, and there's this amazing chocolate store called Bridgewater Chocolates. So I brought them back little squares of chocolates, and we did it with a piece of chocolate. So they were like, we're not going to do raisins. They're sticky and they're not good for your teeth. So I was like, okay. I think it tends to work really well with a raisin, but that's just me. So, all right. So whilst we wait, I'll just kind of share with you guys. Does everybody have a piece of paper and a pen also? Because we're going to need to do that. And then, so the part 2 is going to be, and I'll tell Donnie this as soon as he gets back, but it's going to be kindness and compassion for yourself and others. So this is, I think, going to be really, really helpful, Waynetta, for what you had shared with me. I think in particular, Jessica, when we're talking about moving out of autopilot, that's going to help so much with improving your stress and your resilience. We're going to talk about improving communication with mindfulness, and that's going to be super helpful in terms of how we just support each other as a team, and then how we kind of move from practice success down to the practice partner teams and how we kind of navigate that. So Donnie, were you successful in your pursuit?
I was. I got some salted peanuts, so that works.
Oh, this is going to be great. You're going to love this. This is going to be perfect. So, all right, perfect. So let's move on. So I am going to invite you guys. We're going to start talking about mindfulness. But before we do that, I'd like for you, we're just going to just take a moment, just kind of settle in a little bit. So what I'd love to do is make sure, get your feet firmly planted on the floor. If you need to move forward in your chair just a little bit, you can do that. And then just kind of feel yourself settling into your chair. And you can take your hands and you can put them on your thighs. And if you put your hands facing downwards, that is to ground yourself. If you place your hands up, that's to receive. So just decide which way feels more comfortable to you. And I'm just going to invite you, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes and just take a deep breath in. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can just take a soft gaze. I'm just going to invite you to just take a few deep breaths here. And just focus on that breath as you pull it in and pull it out. You can almost imagine a flagpole starting from your feet. And if you can imagine running your breath up the flagpole, which would be moving it up through to the top of your head. And when it gets to the top of your head, hold that breath for about a 5 count, almost like waving your flag. And then a long exhale, maybe to the count of 8. And just go ahead and pull that breath back in and out. Perfect. When you feel ready, you can open your eyes and smile and have lots of gratitude that we're here together. And it's something so simple, guys, but when the stress of the day feels overwhelming, coming back to your breath, being present to just be able to take a few deep breaths is one of the most basic and simple mindfulness things that we can do. And that breath is really what starts to link us to being able to start to bring down blood pressure, start to minimize stress. So in its very simplest form, starting to be aware of how you're breathing is a huge piece of this. So mindfulness is the state of performing an action on purpose in the present moment without judgment. So it's thinking before speaking, it's acting with awareness, creating inner peace and calm, and it's actually changing our brain structures to manage life more effectively. So if you've ever done any work and looked into the brain and neuroplasticity and how our pathways work, mindfulness actually is one of the only things that can actually help to rewire the neuron pathways of your brain. So this is actual science. So we're going to start working on rewiring our brains so that we have less stress. Does that sound good to you guys? Yes? Okay, good. So I want to make sure that everybody understands that mindfulness is a continuing practice. So it's like building a muscle. So when you go to the gym, right, nobody thinks like, let me go to the gym, I'll lift weights one day and suddenly I'm going to have big muscles, right? We know that it's a continuing practice. This is not a one and done. So I'm going to encourage you all today to think about this class as a launching point in a practice. And we know that with anything that we practice, it's something that we need to do over and over again, right? Donnie, when you were in the military, did you have to practice anything?
Every day, that's all we do. Train, train, train.
Yeah, right? So that's how we train, right? It's how we build resilience. It's how we build that muscle to be able to be ready to go, right? So I love this quote from Mark Benioff from the CEO of Salesforce. And there is a lot of new folks stepping into the mindfulness game, like, for example, Google search within yourself. So it's a very forward-thinking practice, and Guardian is a very forward-thinking kind of DSO that absolutely puts people first. And that's why I think this is such an incredible thing to start sharing with you guys. Benioff is known for integrating mindfulness and meditation practices into Salesforce's culture. And he believes that being present and conscious can lead to better decision-making, innovation, and well-being, both personally and professionally. So let's move into section 1, which is autopilot. And this is really about starting to reclaim the moment. So scenario 1, has anybody taken a walk with a young child before? No, none of you guys have ever done that? Maybe? Okay, well, if you haven't, think about what it might be like if you did. So taking a walk with a young child, moving slowly, stopping often, seeing through his or her eyes the extraordinary richness of simple objects. It's kind of like seeing for the first time. Scenario 2, and I know you guys all have done this before. You're driving on a familiar route and then suddenly realize that for miles you've been quite unaware of your surroundings. You've been totally lost in thought about other things. You've been driving on autopilot. You guys know what I'm talking about with that? You're like, suddenly you're at a different exit. You're like, how did I get here? So just as we often drive on automatic pilot, careful reflection reveals that we can also actually live on automatic pilot much of the time. And the problem is that when we're out of touch in this way, our mind is never idle, right? It's doing what it's programmed to do. And it uses all the time to rehearse all the things we've planned to do or daydream about what we might do. So when we start thinking about moving out of autopilot and moving into being present, this is a big part of mindfulness. And what it can really do is help our teams provide enhanced patient care while taking better care of their own and our own mental health. So these 2 scenarios that I shared with you guys really reflect the difference between really living life as it happens and then our more usual way of rushing through life without seeing, tasting, smelling, or touching, which kind of can keep us out of touch with the world. So when we're on automatic pilot, our minds are taken over by this doing mode, right? And it's constantly working in the background without our knowledge, consent, or deliberate choice. So contrary to popular opinion, you are not your mind. Your mind is a tool. There is another part of you, and how you know you're not your mind is reflected in when we're able to start to move out of just doing into more being, right? And this is really important because it really helps us start to stop this thing called rumination. Have you ever had a situation where you just can't stop thinking about something? Like when you're trying to go to sleep at night and there's that one practice and that one person, or there's something going on your team and you're just kind of playing it over and over and over in your head again. So we're going to start teaching you some of these tools in order to start to stop this from happening. So let's pause, and I want you guys to consider the implications, okay? So what do you think living on autopilot does to practice teams? Let's have a quick discussion about this. Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? What do you guys think?
I think it could be both, right? I mean, I think that it creates like structure at times, but then at the other end, it could also create like a burnout fast.
Yes, good point.
Yeah, I think that's one of our biggest challenges is, I'm assuming this is part of that, is doing what we've always done and not, thinking outside the box.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody else?
I think when we go through the motions, then we lose that human connection and just communication.
Yeah, exactly. And so let's look. So there's positives and negatives to this, right? there's certain things on autopilot that we have to be able to do, or we just can't function, right? Like I type and that's kind of autopilot, right? Like that's not a bad thing. But what starts to happen when we're on autopilot or we start going into rumination, imagine an assistant, imagine a hygienist, imagine a doctor who can't stop thinking about something that happened last night or something that's about to happen tomorrow, and they're working on a patient. What happens then?
Quality of work isn't there.
Yeah. I mean,
Mistakes are made.
Yeah, mistakes are made. And this is a huge liability, right? Like can be very, very scary. So, you know, a lot of times when I start talking about these kinds of things, people are like, oh, we don't have the budget to invest in this. And oh, this is that woo-woo stuff. But really what we're talking about is giving people these very important tools that I never learned to do this as a kid. Like most of us don't get this kind of training and this kind of knowledge base, but it is so important that we start to arm our people with these kinds of tools, because then it really protects us. It starts to create a layer of protection against liability in a whole different way. So for your consideration, we really have two different mental modes. We have this driven doing mode where it's like we're doing. And then we have this other part of ourselves, which is being. So in the driven doing mode, we are fixed on a goal. We have a sense of we have to or we should. We're constantly monitoring. This is where we get really exhausted and tiring because we have to be vigilant. We've got to be on our guard. We've got to always be watching. The focus is on the past or on the future. And it evaluates feelings as good to hang on to or bad to get rid of. And the focus of experience is on progress towards a goal, which that part of it isn't always a bad thing. But we also want to give our teams the ability to experience and have the freedom to be fresh and responsive, right? When we're in this being mode, we don't have to necessarily be attached to the goal. That doesn't mean we don't have goals, right? But it means that we're able to start to shift out of expectation or obligation into opportunity. And that feels so much better. We accept and allow what is. We don't have this pressure to monitor, and we're able to be focused in the present. And we allow feelings to come into the awareness and understand that they're more temporary, kind of like an ocean coming in and coming out. And we learn how to ride the waves, right? And so particularly what I'm seeing in our industry is a much bigger focus on mental health, right? We have CE coming up where we're having an expectation, you know, for our practice teams to really start to do these kinds of things because of the stress and anxiety that working in this industry can create. So these are really impactful and important things that we're talking about. So as we were sharing a moment ago, the ability to walk, drive a car, type on a keyboard with a portion of our processing on automatic pilot is actually a vital adaptive skill. But the effects of automatic pilot become harmful when we go on autopilot to process our emotional experience, right? And that's where we can get into some challenges. So having openness and acceptance to the unfolding moment. So when we're in a state of complete mindful awareness to the present moment, it becomes the complete opposite of being on autopilot, right? So instead of being distracted by every incoming stimuli, you have a conscious intention to direct your focus. So, and instead of your attention being completely taken away by thoughts and concepts, you're open to experiencing this direct felt sensory experience of the present moment. Again, think about patient care. So instead of analyzing and judging whatever is currently happening, you have an attitude of openness and acceptance to the present moment. And so this is the goal, right? This is the goal, to get people to be super present and be in that intentional place, right? So this idea of rumination, right? It involves repetitive thinking or dwelling potentially on negative feelings and distress and their causes. And this repetitive negative aspect of rumination can actually contribute to the development of depression or anxiety and other really challenging things. So this is why we really want to start to work on being able to move out of this. So let's practice. This is where the raisin and the peanut in. So let's go ahead and grab your and I'm going to take you through a really fun mindful eating exercise that's going to help us to wake up from autopilot. Okay, so when you're ready, take your object and place it in the palm of your hand. I'd like you to bring your attention to the experience of seeing what is in your hand. Exploring the object with your eyes as if you had never seen such an object before. Bringing a wholehearted attention as you look closely and carefully. Noticing perhaps how the light hits your raisin, cranberry, or peanut, any shadows, ridges, or valleys on the surface, parts that are dull or glossy, and allow yourself to explore it fully with your eyes. Perhaps picking the raisin up with your thumb and forefinger and turning it over to explore it from all sides. If while you're doing this, any thoughts come to mind such as, what a strange thing I'm doing, or what's the point of this? Then just note them as thoughts, and as best as you can, bring your awareness back to the experience of seeing your cranberry, raisin, or peanut. And now, as you hold the object, bring your full attention to the experience of touch, feeling your raisin, peanut, or cranberry. Notice any stickiness or smoothness. If you choose, gently roll the object between your thumb and your finger, noticing parts that are soft, yielding, or dense, sharp even. Whatever you find, bring awareness of your experience right now in this moment. And when you're ready, bring the raisin, cranberry, peanut up to your nose and hold it there. Inhaling and becoming aware of what you notice. Notice any perfume or aroma that might be present, or if nothing is there, noticing this as well. Aware of any changes in your experience over time. And now slowly taking the raisin and preparing it to place in your mouth. Aware of the changing pattern of sensation in your arm as it moves. Noticing how your hand and arm know exactly where to place the raisin, cranberry, peanut, perhaps closing your eyes at this point if you choose. Placing the raisin, cranberry, peanut in your mouth. Notice if the tongue comes out to meet it. Putting it on your tongue and allowing it to be in your mouth, but not chewing. Perhaps noticing any changes inside of your mouth. Exploring the sensation of having the raisin on your tongue, turning it over and over, exploring its surface, feeling the ridges and hollows, perhaps moving it around your mouth to the sides, to the roof of your mouth. And when you're ready, moving the raisin between your teeth and biting on it and very slowly starting to chew. Notice what's happening in your mouth. Any taste sensations released by the chewing, and just take your time. Noticing any changes in your mouth and any changes in the consistency of the raisin. Feeling the toughness of the skin, the softness of the flesh. Then, when you feel ready to swallow, seeing if you can first detect the intention to swallow as it comes up, so that even this is experienced with awareness before actually going ahead and swallowing it. Finally, following any sensations of swallowing, seeing the raisin, cranberry, peanut moving down to your stomach and noticing the after effects of having the raisin in your mouth. Now allowing your eyes to open if they've been closed and coming back in. What was your experience like? Who wants to share?
Yeah, I'll share. It was, it's like you said, you just don't take time to look at and think and feel all of those things, whether it's eating or anything else we do throughout the day, right? It's go time. So to take that time and really see all the different aspects of that one little thing you did definitely calms the soul, I guess.
Yeah, what a great experience, Donnie. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to share?
I think I was surprised how much energy it took to stay focused on that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What sensations or feelings were you aware of?
Like the biological sensation, like realizing your tongue moving
Yeah.
as you were placing it in your mouth, and then just like, you know, how your mouth, the saliva and stuff starting to work just naturally.
Right. Isn't that amazing how our body just starts to do these things, right? How did this differ from your normal experience of eating? Jessica?
Normally doing a lot of other things at the same time.
Right, multitasking. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Jessica, did you want to share?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, usually just kind of without thought, just during the day, grabbing what I can and eating. So yeah, just taking the time to actually think about what is going on was different.
Yeah, exactly. Catherine, did you want to share anything? If not, that's okay too.
No, it's just similar to what Waynetta and Jess had said, more of like the biological awareness.
Exactly. So what does this exercise have to do with freeing ourselves from automatic pilot, right? So it's really important, actually. It shows us that we can change our experience just by changing the way we pay attention to it. As we will see, this gives us a whole new range of options for relating differently to our emotions, right? But I want to remind you guys that this is a practice, right? And right now you're super engaged, you just had this experience. After we get off this call, you'll completely forget about what we did because you'll be on to the next thing. So that's the importance of doing this work and hacking how to be present so we can be aware, right? So I teach a process. It's my 5-step process to a growth mindset. First is being present. We have to be present before we can be aware, mindfully aware, right? It shows us, this exercise, that mindfulness helps us notice things that we might otherwise miss. This means we're more likely to spot the early warning signs of slipping into anxiety or worry or rumination. And it shows us also that on automatic pilot, that thinking can take us places we might not choose to go. We can choose to come back by deliberately refocusing our attention on our sense experience in the moment. So that's why I love to do this practice with our teams. And I think it's so powerful. So thanks for doing that with me. So how do we start to hack this? So creating reminders to practice. One of my favorite things is Post-it notes, you guys. I put Post-it notes on my mirror. I put it on my refrigerator door, on my computer, to stop and remind myself to be present, because we all get caught up, right? So that's one of my favorite hacks, is that. Another hack that I love is I actually put reminders in my phone to pop up to say, okay, like, how am I showing up right now in the world? Number 2, I love grounding. So there's 2 parts to this. There's physical grounding. If you follow me on my Facebook, I know Kim does. I just posted a picture just a few minutes ago before I got on this call. I went out in my backyard and I laid in the grass for 15 minutes just to help myself, because I was feeling a little tired. I've been up since about 5. So 15 minutes of just grounding into the earth really can help me to reset. But then also another technique is using your 5 senses. So I actually use this with my daughter when she gets dysregulated. And it's a really powerful technique that we can use ourselves. So it's 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can touch, and I think there's what taste. So it's the 5 different things. You can do it in whatever order you want, but it's basically using all the different senses. And this is all to help us to get into the present moment. So And then I have, this is our first huddle hack. So I love this idea. And one of those things is when we're in huddle on a daily basis, is just taking time to have everybody breathe. It's something so simple. And so I'm actually going to teach you guys another breathing technique very quickly right now. So I want you guys to make one of these with me. And I want you to take your pinky and put it over your left nostril. And I want you to inhale through your right nostril to the count of 5 and hold the breath. Close off your right with the thumb and then exhale through the left. And then again, inhale through the left. Close off your nostril and exhale through the right. We call this nature's Xanax. And if you do just a few rounds of this, 4 or 5 rounds, it literally starts to re-regulate everything within your body. It's something that you can do very quickly if you feel yourself being triggered, if you feel yourself being stressed. You can do it in the bathroom. You can do it it's something that is very, very simple that we can teach our teams to do. That's a game changer. So it's one of the breathing techniques is something that I love to teach. So just a few things today. We obviously do a lot more of this during the 6 weeks, but just so you guys start to get an idea. All right, so part 2, kindness and compassion. Waynetta, this part is all for you, my dear. So how we take care of ourselves and others. So this was a big aha for me, you guys. I never really understood the difference between empathy and compassion. And this was like, oh, okay. So empathy is the ability to observe another's pain and attempt to walk in their shoes. Compassion is the expression of empathy with boundaries, meaning that we do not take on another's pain when we express compassion. So our providers, many of our clinicians, and many of you, I'm sure, are empaths. I'm an empath. Or do you guys know if any of you guys are empaths? So you feel things very deeply when other people are feeling them. As a little girl, and still to this day, I can't watch scary movies. I have a lot of trouble watching the news. It deeply, deeply bothers me. Can any of you guys relate to that? So self-care and normalizing self-care and having and creating a culture that celebrates work-life integration and taking care of ourselves is very, very important. And I think normalizing this and is a really important thing. So have you ever heard the analogy? So if you've ever flown on a commercial airplane, you've heard the pre-flight safety procedures in which they ask that you put on your own oxygen mask before helping a child or a loved one with theirs. Why? Why do they do that? Anybody? Bueller? You guys know why?
Because if you're not, I mean, if you can't save yourself, you can't save others, essentially.
Right. Because if you lose consciousness while trying to help them, you'll not be able to help them at all. And this is also the case with the practice of compassion. And showing empathy with boundaries is critical to remaining healthy and available for others. So has anybody heard of the concept of compassion fatigue before? So Dr. Charles Figley is a world-renowned traumatologist, and he refers to compassion fatigue as the cost of caring. And he has defined it as the deep physical, emotional, and spiritual exhaustion that can result from working day to day in an intense caring environment. So I would wonder if any of you all are actually having some compassion fatigue because of how much we support all of these practice teams. So it's a state experienced by those helping people in distress. It's an extreme state of tension and preoccupation, perhaps with the suffering of those being helped, to the degree that it can be actually traumatizing for the helper. So it's a phenomenon that stems from chronic exposure to a patient's suffering and negatively affects healthcare workers and providers' well-being and overall job performance. So the helper, in contrast to the people being helped, is traumatized or suffering through their own efforts to empathize and be compassionate. And often this leads to poor self-care and extreme self-sacrifice in the process of helping. I see it all the time. And it's something that we really have to be careful and we really have to be mindful and watch for, because the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as being as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. And this is from Dr. Rachel Remen, who wrote a book called Kitchen Table Wisdom. And I think it's also really important to understand that burnout is different from compassion fatigue. And there's a difference between these two things. So in the 1970s, Dr. Charles Figley began studying traumatized people. And he began to realize that in the late 1980s, most of the colleagues that he had worked with in the field, primarily as practitioners, were no longer working in the field. And in conversations with them, it became clear to him that it wasn't burnout, because burnout is more of a lack of satisfaction with your job, too much stress, not enough pay. So there's a difference between burnout and compassion fatigue. And when we're working with our practice staff teams, we really have to be aware of these two separate things, right? And then be able to help solve for these two particular different things. If you were 100% compassionate 100% of the time, there would be nothing left. So we have to first practice compassion for ourselves. And I think it's actually a really, really important thing. So how do we do that? So we need to build our distress tolerance. And with all things in mindfulness, and I'm hoping that from today you'll take away a few golden nuggets. One of them is awareness. So when we practice awareness, awareness equals prevention in all these different elements that we're talking about. Particularly also, awareness is prevention when it comes to mitigating the risk of compassion fatigue. Improved self-care is the cornerstone to mitigating the impact of compassion fatigue. And it also very much, Waynetta, has a lot to do with what you were sharing, you know, and everybody was talking about with our teams, right? How do we improve our resilience? How do we improve our personal well-being? How do we support each other and as a team and with our culture? So do we have a culture where we're just like, oh, we need to work, work, work? Or are we also espousing time for exercise, maybe, you know, meditation, journaling, all of these kinds of things? So just things for you guys to start thinking about as a team. And, you know, when you guys come together as a team, you could certainly start asking each other and helping hold each other accountable. Hey, what did you do to take good care of yourself in the last week? And then we can start to share and we start to normalize these things, you know? So often when we do our leadership meetings, I start with one good thing personally and one good thing professionally. And I feel it's a really good segue. And I think that maybe it might be a really nice idea to start the segue and say, how did you take good care of yourself over the last week? Because again, that will normalize. So time for a little workshopping. Grab your pen and paper. So I want to talk to you guys about 5 steps to how we start to do this. And I'd love to leave a little bit of time on this so we can share together as a team. So step 1 is replenish. So as helpers, we are the tools of our trade, right? Our energy, vitality, our attitude, our optimism, and more all contribute to our success and capacity within our work. We have to be healthy to do our best work in such a way that is sustainable and enriching over time, okay? We must practice what we preach and ensure that our own restorative self-care is a top priority in order to prevent fatigue in all different ways. So I want you to take a moment and consider how you replenish your mind, body, heart, and spirit, and write that down. I'll give you 1 minute. Great job, guys. Now, I want you to take note, and you can come back to this later. If there's an area where you feel you aren't replenishing, I want you to come back and I want you to make some notes about what else you think you need to do. Number 2, support. Emotional support, peer support are all helpful when it comes to mitigating the risk of burnout and fatigue. And in fact, social support is one of the key predictors of whether or not a professional will suffer or stay well. And we really need to make sure that we support each other. We're not meant to do this alone. So who's on your support team? I'd like you guys to just write down a few names to make sure that you know who's your support team that you can go to when you need help, both personally and professionally. Great job. All right, number 3 is connect. Staying connected to the meaning. So research shows that the more we stay connected to hope, joy, reward, sense of purpose and meaning within our work as helpers, the more we diminish the risk for burnout and compassion fatigue. What's your why? Why do you get out of bed in the morning to do the work you do? Write it down. Then I want you to write down what brings you joy as a helper. What brings you joy in your current role? Number 4 is reflect. So engaging in reflective practice. So practicing mindfulness, journaling, these are all proven ways to prevent us from burnout and fatigue. So the more self-aware and grounded, centered, and present in the moment we are, the more attuned we can be to others' needs, right? Listening within is at the heart of well-being and renewal. So how are you currently engaging in reflective practice? What are you currently doing for that?
Can you explain that again, Marni?
I'm sorry?
Can you explain that one more, number 4?
Yeah, absolutely. So reflective practice, how do you reflect on where you're at in your world, right? Do you journal? Do you spend time, taking walks? Like, what is it that you do to have a reflective practice of being able to tune in to where you're at? And it's typically, my reflective practice typically happens when I don't have the good feelings. Although that doesn't happen all the time. I do a lot of reflective work with journaling as well. I'll explain to you guys my journaling process too. That might be helpful. So that's interesting. I can remember growing up and we used to have diaries, and it would be like, "Dear diary, today I metaboy, or today I went to the store and I bought a piece of candy, right? That's not the kind of journaling that I'm talking about. So the kind of journaling that I'm talking about is the kind of journaling where you learn how to be your own best friend. So the journaling practice that I encourage people to do is, so you make it almost into a ritual. And so you go and find yourself a notebook that really speaks to you. Marshall's tends to have great ones. This is my favorite one right now. And it says, "You had the power all along, my dear." And it's from Glinda, the Good Witch. And I really like the color. I like the pages. It makes me want to write in it, right? So you have to find a journal that kind of speaks to you. And so I have a special pen that I use when I write in it. It says, "You are amazing." One of my friends actually sent it to me. And so I try to go in the mornings when it's still pretty quiet and I journal. And the way that I do it is I ask myself questions and I write the question. And then I wait for my imagination to give me the answer, or what I call my soul or my spirit or whatever feels good to you. But it's about creating that quiet space. And I will say, "How am I feeling today?" Today I feel blank. And I'll be very honest with you guys. It wasn't until I was probably 30 years old, and I will be 44 on my next birthday, that I even knew how to feel my emotions. I just knew that if something felt bad, I would cry. And I couldn't really discern. Didn't have good discernment. So one of the things that I did was I actually printed out like an emotions chart to help me to start to evaluate when I felt bad. Because when you feel good, it's easy, right? I feel happy. Why do I feel happy, right? It's when we have these lower feelings that are kind of sitting in our gut. So I will write, how do I feel? I feel stressed. Why do I feel stressed? I feel stressed because XYZ. And then almost all of this comes from beliefs. So the beliefs that we have are actually inserted into us before the age of 8. I don't know, for those of you on the call that might remember, I kind of talk about a floppy disk in a computer, that the floppy disk goes in and it got stuck in the drive and then it never popped out again. It's kind of my little joke about that. But the thing is what I'll do is I'll say, what do I believe about this that's creating this for me? And then I'll say, well, what's the truth? And I literally journal this whole thing out so that I can engage in reflective practice. When I was younger, it used to be my mother that I would try to do this with, or my best friend, or a spouse. And what I've learned over time is that if you don't go within, you go without. And that it's a lot of pressure to put on other people in your life if you haven't done your own work first. So it's become a really big part of my practice to do this journaling work. And then after I've done it, then I like to share it with those that are closest to me and say, hey, this is where I was at, and this is how I felt, and this is how I was able to shift it. So that's just a little bit about how I do that. And so number 5 is self-compassion. And this is about how you be kind to yourself. And you treat yourself with the same care, compassion, and concern that you show to others, including those who we serve. And we can be really hard on ourselves as helpers, yet self-compassion is the path to having true compassion for others. We have to fill our cup. We have to put on our mask before we do for other people. So I want you to go ahead and write down now, in what ways are you kind and compassionate with yourself? And if you're not currently being kind and compassionate with yourself, what would you like to start to do? I would love if you feel comfortable, if anybody wants to share. So let's kind of talk about number one. And I'd love to hear how you replenish your mind, body, heart, and spirit. So if anybody wants to share, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'll go first. Mine is my 4:30 in the morning workout. Used to good Orange Theory. Now it's built my own at my house. I used to also read professional development books 30 to 60 minutes every night. I've gotten out of that habit. Unfortunately, I need to get back into it. And then just outdoors for me mentally.
I love that. It sounds like maybe we need to, you're going to get back into doing that, huh? Maybe reading at night again. It sounds
Yeah,
like
I need to set that aside. It's definitely been a habit that I've gotten away from, unfortunately.
Okay. Thanks for sharing, Donnie. Anybody else want to share?
I have girls, so we used to. I've gotten away from it because we've just been so busy every day. But we would have like little dance, like just or if any of my daughters, if they were upset about something, we would just blare the music and just dance it off, dance it up.
Dance party. I love that. That's fantastic. Great. Jessica or Kim, I feel like we might have lost Catherine.
No, I'm still here.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, I just didn't be on video, so I was hoping you were. Do you guys want to share anything that you do?
Sure. Yeah. I incorporate my kids also just because their days are so crazy. My days are so crazy. It's easy to just get caught up in life. And sometimes, unfortunately, you bring your frustrations home. So every night for about 20, 30 minutes, we'll sit down and talk about the best part of our day or what we're grateful for. So it's good to hear from their perspective, and they can understand why mommy's so stressed out sometimes too. So
Love that. That's great. It's important. Good. Anybody else? All right.
I have sacred coffee time on the porch every morning, almost without fail. And that is like my thing before I jump into the day. Like I just want to have like 10 minutes of quiet time, my coffee, and then I can like do life. And for me, that's like the thing I protect.
Love that. What kind of coffee do you have, Kim? Do you have like, I have a Nespresso maker and that's my life. What kind do you have?
Yeah, those are wonderful. I have a Keurig, and the one that's like the Keurig and the coffee pot.
Yes. Black Friday is a good time to buy those, by the way. We'll offline. Awesome. All right. Anybody else want to share? I'm going to move on to the next. Okay. So I'd like to hear how we can stay connected to the meaning, and I'd love to hear what's your why. So Jessica, would you like to share what your why is by any chance?
Sure. So is this for Connect, you're saying?
Yes, this is for Connect.
Okay. Yeah. So I know like Guardian's mission is to help, doctors build the practices of their dreams. My why is to, help others feel supported in that. So part of what I like to do is to help others feel like, you know, they're able to do what they're able to do best. And I'm able to help support them in that. So I'm able to make them feel at ease in whatever way possible on the HR side of things. And make their lives as easy as possible by helping them in that. So that's kind of my why in a way. So yeah.
Love it.
there you go, Jess. I love that.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share their why? Great. Does anybody else want to share for number 4 on reflection? Anything that you do for reflection and how that helps you? How do you engage in reflective practice?
I don't do this, and I don't feel like I do number 5 either. So I would love to hear some examples, because I feel like those are 2 where I'm not doing any of those at all.
Okay. So I think I gave you the example for me for how I do that with journaling. So that would be my biggest one, that I do a lot of that work. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to share on what they do for a reflective practice?
So I do something similar to how you journal, Marni, although I'm simplifying that process. I'm doing this in the car a lot of times, leaving offices. But I can tend to ruminate on things. And so I ask myself the questions that you're talking about journaling about. So I'm really just thinking through that in my head, but rather than just like thinking of, oh gosh, I don't feel like that went very well, or oh my gosh, I feel like that went great. I'm asking myself, okay, that felt really good. What about that worked? What about, or if it didn't feel good, what about that could have gone better? And then just kind of trying to envision the solution. But that's not getting it down in a notebook, but I do feel like it's brought some level of intention to the way that I reflect or think about things. And it's helped me move to solutions much more quickly.
Oh, I love that, Kim. I think that's great.
I
Did you
do the
want to
same
say,
thing.
Jessica? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually do a lot of reflecting in the car. So it's funny that you say that. So oftentimes if I'm driving to practices or wherever I'm off to, it's like my quiet time. I'm either listening to a podcast or I'm in silence because I'm a psycho, and I like to sit there and reflect about situations that are going on, or sometimes like if there's a situation that I'm going to have a tough conversation with someone, I'm talking out loud. Like I am going to say what I'm about to prepare to speak to that person about, and I'm practicing it through, and it's just a good time of reflection and just preparing. So I probably look crazy to the car next to me.
So one of the things I've started doing, which might also be helpful, is in my phone, there's a notes section. And I've been creating what I call, now this is for me, but I'm a really spiritual person, so I call them my God notes. And so what I do is I open up a note, and then I actually, when I'm driving or just running around, I open the note, and then I put on the voice to text part of it. So, like if you do the note and then you can hit that, and then I will do gratitude out loud and just thank God for all of the things that I have. And then I also can do reflection in that way too. And then I feel like when I do it that way, it's going somewhere rather than just into the ether. And that's been really, really helpful, because then I can go back, like if I'm driving or, I'm in the house doing stuff, but I don't have the ability to sit down with a journal. That's been really helpful for me too. And I find that not just for reflection, but when I feel like I want to pray over something, or I feel like I need guidance around something, that's when I open up those notes too. If I'm having a particular challenging day, there might be 3 or 4 in one from one day, I just keep opening them up and stuff like that. So I don't know. I just feel like for me, if I'm in my head, I feel like that's when rumination happens, and I keep turning it over and over again. And if I speak it out loud, I again feel like it just kind of goes into the ether. But that to me is a more efficient and productive way to kind of capture. And sometimes I even add pictures in and stuff to those notes. So that, I don't know, Donnie, is that helpful for you?
Yeah, I think I do a lot of what Kim was talking about, is reflecting on the day or reflecting on the situation a lot. But I think writing it down will help, especially like revisiting it the next day or end of the week would be more helpful for me.
That's great. I love that. Okay. So the final thing I just want to talk about is, in what ways are you intentionally kind and compassionate to yourself? And this is about really making sure, I want to hear from you guys, because I'm going to imagine that we might not all have a lot of intentionality in that. So
I try to be very intentional about giving myself permission to have the down day. We all have them. And I think we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves to constantly be productive and be our best selves, and there just will be days when we just aren't. And on those days, we can't always make these adjustments, but like in the work world, on those days, I try to use those days for the tasks that don't take a lot of emotional energy. So maybe it's data entry and it's getting things organized, but it's not necessarily like creating on those days. And then just being kind when things don't go well. Like I think we all can be our own worst critics for sure. We say things to ourselves that we would never say to other people. And I think if we are going to show up and be kind and compassionate to others, we have to first be able to do that for ourselves. And so I think, when things don't go great, accepting that they couldn't have gone different, they can only go differently in the future. And if you're not feeling great, that's okay. And if you don't feel like you were your best self, that's okay. And you're going to figure out a path or a way to do it better next time. And I can't believe how much work it's taken to get to that place, because I have been the queen of beating myself up for a long time. And I think if we can help anybody do anything better in their careers, it's help people show up more kindly for themselves.
Amen, sister. Well
This
said.
is why Kim is my voice of reason and my support.
You are my support. Oh my gosh. You are my support.
Oh my goodness.
I just love that so much. Yeah. So, these are principles. All the things that you're saying, Kim, are all these principles of mindfulness, right? It's about acceptance, right? And it's about accepting the present moment as it's showing up. And then it's an act of surrender with neutrality, without beating ourselves up about it, right? So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I just love what you shared, Kim. Thank you so much for sharing that. It was so impactful. Anybody else have any last other things they want to share on self-compassion before we move on to the next thing? Okay. So here is my next huddle hack for you guys. And this is going to be another little exercise that we're going to do together. This is a quick one. And so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to ask you guys to find your comfortable seat again. And I'm going to ask you, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes. And this is really about finding self-compassion at difficult times. So I want you to imagine something that you have recently struggled with. One thing that you've been struggling with. And with your eyes closed and those feelings close to you, I want you to make strong fists and extend your arms out in front of you with your palms down, closed fists. And I want you, as you're doing this, to really allow those feelings space and think of the event and your associated emotions. Squeeze a little harder. Then, as you begin to open your palms, rotate your hands toward the ceiling or sky and imagine that those feelings or experiences float up out of your hands toward the ceiling or the sky. And I want you in your imagination to picture them getting further and further away, and then open your arms out to the side. This creates an opening in your heart and an openness to a new experience, and allows you to feel as though you're about to take flight. Think of a bird's wings and opening your arm span wider. Then I want you to cross your arms, cross your hands over your shoulders, giving yourself a strong and tight hug. And thank yourself for having the bravery to experience those emotions and for embracing the compassion that is necessary for this practice. Slowly and gently allow your hands to fall into your lap. Keep your eyes closed and take 3 deep breaths. Feel ready, open your eyes and come back to me. So this is a practice that I've done with practice teams, and I actually have seen team members start to cry during this as they are releasing whatever stress is. So this is a huddle hack that we can do, something we can teach our teams. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it allows us an opportunity to release whatever it is that is challenging us. Did you guys like that one? Thoughts? Yeah. All right, so this is our last one. This is part 3. We only have about 22 minutes together, so we're going to go ahead and move through this one. So this is about improving communication with mindfulness. One of my favorite authors is Stephen Covey. And most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. And I love that the National Library of Medicine, specifically the National Center for Biotechnology Information, has been doing some studies on mindfulness. And so I love that mindfulness, with its inherent focus on being present and non-judgmental, is particularly suitable for promoting the quality of communication. So I'm going to talk to you guys about 4 tools. 1 is going to be active listening. 2 is going to be practicing mindful awareness with neutrality. I mentioned this a few minutes ago. 3 is this tool of getting curious. And 4 is in reducing multitasking. So we're going to do an exercise and build our active listening toolbox. Now, when we do this in person with teams, what I typically do is I have people pair off in 2s. So obviously, since we're virtual today, we're going to do this exercise a little bit differently, but I'll make you guys, I'll give you guys a little background on this exercise. So the first time I ever did this exercise, I was about 26 years old. I was living in New York City, and I started working with a coach, and we would come into this big room. It was on like 72nd Street and Broadway. It was like a dance studio that he rented out. And I was 26 years old, and I thought I was a really good listener. I was not. And so he paired us up, and he said, you're going to take turns, and you're going to get 60 seconds. And each of you will go. So during the 60 seconds, when the other person is speaking, you may not talk. You have to sit there, and you can nod, you can smile, but you may not speak. I think it's actually easier to do this when you're on Zoom like this than it is in person. But what we're going to do, I'm just going to kind of teach you guys how to do this listening exercise, because it's so impactful when we do it with other people. So Donnie, would you mind getting us started on this? I would love for you to talk for 60 seconds about a positive experience that you happened to story over the last week or so. And we're all going to practice our active listening, which means that we can smile. And you guys take yourself off of mute, because, we're not going to speak, but I want to, if you were going to speak, that you wouldn't feel like you had a muzzle over your mouth. So we're going to practice, and we can only express smiles, nods when he is speaking, because this is practicing active listening. And then we're going to have one other person go. So will you be my example, Donnie? Will you help us?
I will try.
All right. So I'm going to put 60 seconds on the timer, and we're going to all practice our active listening skills. You're on.
Awesome. Last week, as you guys know, all the directors and the exec team were up in Washington, D.C. We had a really good time out visiting a lot of the good sites in Washington, D.C. Rode scooters. We really kind of bond together, went to a hockey game as well, bond together. The whole purpose of the meeting, though, was to discuss, Guardian and each region, and help each team become better. So there was a lot of good QBR presentations, a lot of good challenging questions, a lot of good helpful feedback on things that were working well, and also some good action items that came out of it for things that were not working well, and things that we need to be doing better on. So overall, again, it was a great week of getting together and bonding with each other, but coming up with solutions to help all of us grow.
Perfect. Great 60 seconds. Did anybody feel like they wanted to jump in while he was speaking and ask him a question or anything? Yeah. So typically what happens, and you can use this with your practice teams, it's different, like I said, on Zoom, because we're used to, I think, practicing active listening better when we're on Zoom, believe it or not. But when you put a room of people together and you're in person, it's a different experience. And so what you do is you have each person take their 60 seconds and then you switch. And then what it does is it kind of turns on the lights for somebody to realize how often we want to interrupt when somebody's speaking. How often, and that we are so often thinking about what we want to say. Again, like I said, this is a different medium when we're on Zoom, because I think it really just kind of helps to make that happen, kind of because of the nature of this. But it's a really great tool to be able to use. And normally what happens is we have these ahas where people are like, I really wanted to ask you a question about this, or I really wanted to jump in and tell you that. And so it just creates another level of mindful communication, right? Practicing active listening for our teams, which really helps to solidify and help our teams kind of get to that next level. So thanks for playing along, Donnie, and thanks for sharing that great story. So I'm going to encourage you guys to encourage your teams to do this exercise. And like I said, I think it works better in person, but it's good to kind of have some other tools in the toolbox. So the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is this idea of practicing mindful awareness, but with neutrality. And I think, Kim, you did an excellent job of helping us to understand that when things don't go well, that we don't have to beat ourselves up about it, right? Like we're not having to judge ourselves. And so I love this quote: the ability to observe without evaluating is the highest form of intelligence. And this is not easy. I think our brains are, and our ego is automatically, we automatically go into judgment. And the reason that we are wired for this is because we judge to keep ourselves safe, right? Like that's where this originates from. I'm judging the car and how quickly the car's coming down the road, and is that car going to hit me or not, right? We have to constantly be making judgments to keep ourselves safe in certain ways, but in other ways this is not helpful to us. And I'll give you guys an example. About a month ago, I took my daughter to the urgent care. While we were sitting there, we were right here at UNC Rex and Holly Springs, and I'm sitting, and it's a glass wall, and I watched this older couple walking through. They were holding hands as they walked through the atrium, and immediately I judged, and I said, oh my gosh, that is so great. I want to be just like that when I'm that age, right? So it wasn't a bad judgment, but it was still a judgment, right? They come on into the waiting room, they sit down. She was not in very good shape. They call her and she gets up. The husband stays sitting. She has a really hard time getting to the door. And when the nurses say, oh, who's with her? He says, I am. And they said, oh, well, you can come back. And he said, no, thank you. She's good. You guys can handle it. I immediately went to judgment, y'all. I started going, I judged him. I was like, oh my gosh, how could he not be there to support his wife? What's the matter with this person? And then I was really present and I caught myself and I said, isn't that interesting, right? And that's the tool I want to teach you guys. I said, isn't that interesting that I immediately went into judgment? Isn't that interesting how I immediately did that? And then I started looking at myself and I said, like, okay, well, you don't know their backstory. You don't know what kind of situation they have, right? Like, I don't know, is that the only 5 minutes that he gets because she's abusive, right? Like, we don't know, right? So it's about starting to have awareness so that when we're in communication with other people, that we're aware of our own judgment, right? And our own things that can come up. So we start to use this tool of what we call being non-judgmental and holding both the good and the bad and the neutral, but without preference. And this is a tool that I learned a long time ago. And it's just, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that I chose to show up in that way? Isn't it interesting that she or he chose to show up in that way? And what it starts to do is it creates space for us to step outside and be the observer, and then be able to start to shift behavior that doesn't work for us anymore. And we take that inner mean girl and that inner mean guy and we say, no, thank you, not today, because we're all probably really good at doing that beating ourselves up thing, right? Like, oh, I did it again. What the heck is the matter with me? So that's not what we're interested in doing in this. We're just trying to hold all of this with neutrality. This is such an impactful and important tool. We cannot be mindfully aware, however, if we're not present, right? And that's the big thing that I wanted to share on that. The next tool, and this is probably one of the biggest game changers, and this is another nugget, in my opinion. If you get nothing else from today, if you take this away and you help teams on this, deepening our understanding and getting curious. Getting curious is the very best tool I think we can use. And it's moving from, I understand, to, can you help me understand? I use this in every aspect of my life, both personally and professionally. And it's actually very strategic. I was actually at the Dental Entrepreneurial Women Conference last week, and I was having a conversation with a couple of women about this. And I was sharing that if we go in, like, say something happens and we go in guns a-blazing, right? Like we're all fired up about something that happened somewhere because somebody told us a story about something that happened. We can go in and we can cause a lot of harm. And so this is why we have to be very careful, because if somebody comes to you and tells you a story about something and there's something that has happened and then you hear it and you're like, oh, I understand. I get it. I understand what happened. Then we go in with a certain kind of energy, right? When we go in with, can you help me understand? The strategy of that is we're getting information first, right? We're understanding from another person's perspective. And what this does is it helps us to, again, create that space and then hold whatever happened with neutrality. And it puts you in a wonderful position of power and of understanding. And that way we can have compassion and it creates space. So this is one of the best tools I think I've ever learned. So getting curious, like getting really intimate with that is a huge, huge, huge opportunity for us. Next is reducing multitasking. Okay, so this is my favorite, one of my favorite slides, because I don't know if you guys remember, there used to be this commercial about your brain on drugs, and they put eggs in a frying pan. Do you guys remember this commercial? And it was like, this is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? So this is your brain. This is your brain on multitasking. This is your brain not on multitasking. And I feel like in our society, we often think this is a great thing. Like, oh, how well can you multitask? But it's actually incredibly dangerous. And when we're multitasking, it can really affect our mindful communication. And this is from the Cleveland Clinic, and says that studies show that when our brain is constantly switching gears to bounce back and forth between tasks, especially when those tasks are complex and require our active attention, we actually become less efficient and we're more likely to make mistakes. So instead of trying to do several things at once, and none of them go well, this is from a book called Organize Your Mind, Organize Your Life. So doctors Hammermess and Morse suggest what they call set shifting, right? So basically, instead of trying to do, all these different things, so it's basically what you do is you completely shift your attention from one task to the next and focus on the task at hand, right? So you are in one task, and when you complete it, then you shift into the next thing, right? And so this is really, really helpful. And when we, as leaders, I think tips to avoid multitasking is that we have to really set up a culture that doesn't espouse multitasking from leadership down, right? As goes the leadership team, goes the rest of our practices in our organization. So we need our leaders to say that we don't espouse multitasking. We need everybody really taking their time. And I think we also need to regularly evaluate workload and responsibilities. Kim, I know you do this really, really well. You're constantly looking, at what everybody's doing and as the right people in the right seats. And this is another thing, Kim, you talked about this, schedule for energy, not for time. That's another big takeaway. If there is going to be a task that requires a lot of mental energy, being kind to ourselves and understanding how that works. So that is all that I have, you guys, in terms of the presentation. So questions, key takeaways, discussion, what questions can I answer for you?
No questions, but I appreciate your time with us. And I think that it's really insightful to hear everybody else's viewpoint of mindfulness and how it impacts their life and where they feel like they can better improve upon it. I think as a team, it'll help to kind of make us all aware of each other's weak spots and where we can help fill the gap at times.
Love that. Thank you for sharing. Awesome.
Marni, do you have any tips for us to be able to recognize burnout versus compassion fatigue and how we might handle those things differently with a team member?
That's a great question. I would really suggest, Kim, and you do a great job of this already, it's getting curious. It's asking really good questions and being really consultative, and finding out how that person is kind of wired. So the difference between burnout is like, if you're hearing words like, I have so much work, I don't know what to do, I'm so overwhelmed, by the work, then that's definitely a burnout type of situation. And then if it's compassion fatigue, I think it's definitely going to be somebody who has a really high level of empathy, but they don't know how to have healthy boundaries around that. And so when you speak to them and you say to them, what are you experiencing, listening for some of those cues that we talked about around compassion fatigue. And that's kind of how I would approach that. And then it's really also then probably starting to, I would start to work with them on some mindfulness practices if it's compassion fatigue. If it's burnout, then that's a different situation where we probably need to look at their responsibilities, how much they're taking on, and if their workload, we need to kind of shift some things around. Great question. Anybody else? Questions, comments, thoughts? Would you like me guys to share with you? I know we only have a couple of minutes, but I could share with you what the 6-week program is and how I work with teams. Would that be helpful? Are you guys interested in that?
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
So before I do that, let me just share with you guys, this is quantifying results of this. So what's the ROI, right? Like we always have that question. So you know how you guys took that survey ahead of time? I do that with practice teams. And so this is one practice team, and this is the survey that you guys took. And these were the results pre-mindfulness course. And then these were the results after the course. So as you can see, we started to have a significant shift after working together for just 6 weeks. So I'm really proud of this, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to do that. And so this is a basic program. I can offer it both virtually or in person. It's a little more cost efficient to do it virtually, but it's basically 6 weeks, and it's a 60-minute weekly session over lunch. It's once a week, so that way it doesn't cut into production time. We also do a group chat through like GroupMe or WhatsApp so that people stay connected. And then they actually have homework every week. So it's not, so the session acts as a container and we teach from the session. But then they're literally doing work, but it's not overwhelming. It's a couple of things. So that way we make sure that we're not, you know, overwhelming anybody. And then I always suggest to do like a quarterly follow-up, like a 1-hour session. So that's virtual, and then we have the in-person part of it. So I sure would love the opportunity to pilot this again and do it at a practice. You know, if you guys have one in mind, I would love the opportunity. I'd be super grateful for that. So I'm happy again to send this to you guys. But again, so what did we do today? So we defined mindfulness. We talked about moving out of autopilot. We talked about kindness and compassion for ourselves and others, improving communication with mindfulness. And it is 3:03, so I'm ran over by 3 minutes. So I apologize for that, but I really, really appreciate your guys' time. Thank you so much for today.
No, it's been awesome, Marni. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again. So have a great day, and I hope I'll get to see all of you in person real soon.
Right.
Awesome. Take care.
Bye.